Well, beloved, today is the first Sunday of Advent, so we are brought into this, from the Gospel, we're brought into this idea of watching and waiting. It's what the season of Advent is all about. So let's start with kind of a quick primer on what it is that we're doing here during Advent. So we've made it through Thanksgiving and the tryptophan slump, and we've made it through Good Friday, or not Good Friday, almost should be Good Friday, Black Friday, not very good, actually, and all that goes on with that. And as we enter into Advent, it's really popular for people to preach all sorts of sermons about the evils of the commercialization of Christmas, about how we need to slow ourselves down, how about the culture has taken over Christmas, that kind of stuff. I always say, well, at least the culture still remembers Christmas. There's something there. We just need to work on bringing that core out. And I think sometimes we can go too far in the other direction. I mean, the problem with commercialization is it brings too much stress into the Christmas season. But then when we start hitting people over the head with keep Christ and Christmas, then we add another stressor during the time of Advent. We're making it worse rather than making it better. We're heading to a point of Advent being a harder time to keep just because we're trying so hard to do it than it would be if we just kind of left things alone sometimes. So what is it we should be doing during this period of Advent? Well, as the video showed, this is not Lent. So this is not a time of penitence. This isn't a time where we're spending a lot of time talking about the things we've done and left undone. This is supposed to be a time of hope. We're talking about not only the first advent of Jesus, where Jesus came into the world 2,000 years ago, where God became incarnate among us, but the belief that at the end, Jesus will come back and will make all things right. All this crazy stuff people have around the rapture, about the second coming of Christ, about all this stuff. What we're talking about is the time where God makes everything right, where all the wrongs in the world are changed and we're transformed into something different. That's really what it is. Paul talks about that in the lesson today. When he says, "For salvation is nearer to us now than when we became believers. The night is far gone. The day is near." So Advent is a time of watching and waiting. But how do we do that in the middle of an onslaught of cultural memes about what we should be doing around this time? Well, there's a an ancient fable. It's found in almost all cultures. You find this in both Asian and in Greek culture. In the Aesop's fables, they call this the oak and the reed. It's also sometimes called the oak and the willow. And the idea being that the oak tree grows near the reed and is constantly mocking the reed and saying, "Look how big I am. Look how huge my trunk is. Look at how I stand up to the wind. And every time the wind blows, you bend." Well, a gale comes along and blows so hard that it cracks the oak tree over. Well, the reed still bends in the wind. And then after it's done, the reed goes back to what it was. The idea being that holding on to something, just trying to stop the onslaught, is probably not going to work. It comes full force. But being able to hold on to something, being able to hold on to part of the hope and the joy of Advent, is what helps us to survive. We often treat things like this as if it were a Fabergé egg, something really delicate, and if we just don't do it right and we don't get it all together, it's going to shatter and we won't have anything left. But if there's anything you should read from especially the agrarian metaphors that Jesus uses, it's more like a weed. The gospel is something that no matter how hard we as humans try to pave it over, there's always a crack in the pavement that the gospel comes back up through. It's always finding its way into our lives, even at the most inopportune times. And I'd say the first step from Advent, you've already taken, because you're here. We are long past the time in our culture where there's something to be gained by going to church in terms of economic or social benefit. There was a time where which church you went to in a town determined what your social status was and who you would be able to interact with and who you would have business dealings with during the week. We're long past that point. We're to a point where the culture, if you want to stay home on a Sunday morning, the culture is fine with that. And I'm fine with that too. I'm not fine with you staying home on Sunday morning. I'm fine with the fact that we're no longer told that we have to be at church, that the culture expects that. Because that means that when people are here, they're here for the right reasons. You're here because you want to hear the gospel, because you need the sustenance of the body and blood of Christ. So the first step in a Holy Advent is what you've already taken. You've taken a step. Taking that reed metaphor a little further, start with something small. Do something small. Spend 5 minutes in silence per day. Turn off the cell phones, turn off all the distractions, and just try to spend 5 minutes in a quiet time. It can make a huge difference, just something different in your time. Or do something like go to Forward Movement and use their daily prayer. The daily meditations at Forward Day by Day can be done in less than 2 minutes a day. It's a really easy reading. And if you're not an online person, we have the printed copies out in the Tardif room, so those are available there as well. Or an Advent calendar. We saw the one from Busted Halo there. Also the Society of St. John the Evangelist, which is a monastic order within the Episcopal Church based in Cambridge, Massachusetts, also has an online Advent calendar this year. And in fact, it works on both their website and through Pinterest. So this is another way of setting aside some time and looking at things differently. Or you can go to Pick and Save and buy one of those, the ones with the really awful waxy chocolate in them. I wonder if Godiva has an Advent calendar, because that would actually be worth it. I never really thought about that. But in any case, Advent shouldn't be about worrying about what we haven't done right. It shouldn't be worrying about the things we haven't gotten right and gotten wrong. It should be about joy. It should be about the expectant waiting for Jesus coming into the world. So we're in this season of watching and waiting. And we do a few things differently during the service, during Advent. Our Eucharistic prayer is B, which is a little bit different. We use the contemporary version of the Lord's Prayer, which makes us stop and think about what we're saying. That's the reason why we do that. And the other thing that we'll be doing during Advent is taking a short period of silence after the sermon. we'll be taking a 3-minute silence after the sermon. And what I have to tell people is, when I say silence, I don't mean that it's going to be quiet, because we have children in this service. It's never going to be completely quiet. People always make noise, plus there's going to be people coming down the road. We might have a fire truck, you never know. The point of this kind of silence is not the absence of noise. It's trying to put ourselves into a place where we're open and expectant and waiting. So 3 minutes can be very challenging for a lot of us. I mean, even for myself, trying to clear your mind for 3 minutes and get away from distractions can be really difficult. But I'd ask you to try to live into it. Try to put yourself into a place that you can be watching and waiting for the return of Jesus into our lives. Amen.